Welcome to our meeting today. I'm David Bright. I'm an associate professor here in the Department of Management and International Business in the Rochelle College of Business at Wright State. I'm also the president of the OD Network for the Miami Valley, and also the planning committee chair for this event, for the Organizational Effectiveness Lecture Series. And we're just delighted to have you here, so thank you very much for coming. I'd like to introduce you to the members of the planning committee who have worked very, very hard to make this event happen. You can, I guess each of these individuals represents a different organization here in the Valley. So this is part of what we're trying to accomplish with the Organizational Effectiveness Lecture Series, to create a forum where we can bring together these organizations that all have a very similar focus, but we tend to look at similar issues from a different perspective. And what we were trying to do is to create partnership, to create bridges between those organizations, and find commonalities and create connections that can help us all to be more effective as we think about the work that we do in this area. So let me introduce you to the members of our planning committee. And if you're here, please stand or wave your hand so everyone can see you. And then I'll ask all of us to acknowledge them at after I introduce them all. So first we have Dr. Lana Rux. Where's Dr. Rux? Back here. She is the principal at Rux Consulting and vice president of the OD Network. We have Cindy Schisler back here with the HR department at Wright State, and she is the past president of ASTD. We have Lisa Ann Poe standing next to her. She's the current president of ASTD and a training facilitator in this area. We have Dr. Melissa Grice, who is one of my colleagues in the Department of Management and International Business, a professor of human resources. Dr. Bud Baker over here. He's the chair of the Department of Management and International Business and professor of management. Cheryl Spillman. Where's Cheryl? Outside. She was helping to greet you all when you came in. She's the assistant to the director and affiliated with the Ohio Center of Excellence in Human-Centered Innovation here at Wright State University. We have Erin Henry. Erin's back here. She is the president of the Miami Valley Human Resources Association and also on the faculty at Sinclair Community College. Amanda Martin over here. Amanda is the vice president of the Springfield Human Resource Association and also an HR manager at Avitech. And finally, Heather Martin. Is she in the room? Oh, there she is. Heather is our publications hero. She is affiliated with Innovative Interchange on the board for the OD Network. And we're just grateful for all the work that she's done to help prepare our printed materials. So please join me in thanking those who are part of the planning committee. We also want to give thanks to the many organizations who have offered financial or other significant sponsorship for this event. Our presenting sponsors include the Rochelle College of Business, the Wright State University Office of the President and the Provost, the Wright State University Department of Human Resources, and the Ohio Center of Excellence in Human-Centered Innovation here at Wright State University. Our supporting sponsors include the Rux Group, Lee Hecht Harrison, the DeVry University Keller School of Management, and Project Management International. Please join me in thanking these organizations for their generous support. So to get us started, I'd like to explain just a little bit about the background behind the Organizational Effectiveness Lecture Series and a little bit about what led to this meeting. So last year, the leaders that I've just acknowledged, representing several professional development organizations in this area, we began to meet and discuss an idea. We acknowledge that our organizations each have a unique perspective, but often we're doing activities in isolation from one another. So we just asked ourselves, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it make sense for us to collaborate in sponsoring a program or series of events that build bridges. The Organizational Effectiveness Lecture Series is the outcome of these conversations, and it builds on a tradition of hosting what used to be called the HR Lecture Series that was sponsored by the Department of Management at Wright State University for almost 2 decades. So why the name Organizational Effectiveness? The idea of organizational effectiveness invokes a more systematic way of viewing the work we do in organizational life. And we think this is a fitting way to describe the overlap and commonalities that are shared by functions of like human resources management, organization development, strategic management, leadership development, training, among many others. So our hope is that we can grow the Organizational Effectiveness Lecture Series and make it a tradition of collaboration that helps to build connections and bridges throughout the Miami Valley. And we're very excited that you are here as part of this first meeting. Let me also mention that these meetings are intended to be very interactive. And so in this spirit, the OD Network for the Miami Valley is sponsoring what we call a deep dive next Thursday at 7:30 in the morning, another breakfast meeting. It'll be at the Fairfield Commons Panera. And the idea here is that after a meeting like this, we often walk away with lots of questions and thoughts. Maybe even some insights that percolate. So what we do with the deep dive is just create an opportunity for informal conversation where we can talk about the things that, or those ideas that have come to us. So again, this is next Thursday, 7:30 at the Fairfield Commons Panera. Before I introduce our panelists for today, I'd just like to give a few moments to our major presenting sponsor, represented by Dr. Birkwood Farmer, the outgoing Dean of the Raj Soin College of Business. Birkwood, if I could just say, has presided over the college for the last decade, and he's helped to lay the foundation for our next successful phase as an institution. We really appreciate his service. So, Dr. Farmer.
Well, thank you, David. And as my good friend here, the former dean, knows that what a dean does is only a reflection of his faculty.
That's right.
And I'm very fortunate to have good faculty here, but also particularly in the Department of Management, and people like David Bright and Melissa. And they're the ones that sponsor this and develop this. And David I was thinking this morning coming down, we just went through 4 months of revisions in our college mission, vision, and values. And David was a champion of that. He was a leader of that. And one thing that our faculty made sure is that we would be stronger in the next decade in terms of what our faculty and students would do in the community. We've been strong in that for the last 10 years, but we're going to be even stronger. And I think if you look around the country now, Ken, you'll see that business schools are going to become more active participants in the community. And I think this conference in organizational effectiveness and leadership is one example of the mission of the Raj Soin College of Business, is to have our faculty work with organizations and businesses to enable them to become more effective in terms of their mission and objectives. And so I just want to thank the participants here this morning. I want to thank the speakers. And I know this is going to be a real exciting conference. So thank you for being here with us.
Thanks very much. Okay. Now we get to the exciting part. I'd want to introduce our panelists. I'm excited about our topic today. As we thought about how to frame today's event, we wanted to provoke a discussion about what it means to be extraordinary as an organization. I know Kim's going to talk a little bit about this in terms of a continuum of organizational states and what it means to be extraordinary, but this is a question that I personally have been researching and working on now for well over a decade. And some of the insights that I think have come to me include the understanding that extraordinary organizing really is a people-driven process. It requires people at all levels of an organization to be engaged, heart, mind, and soul, in the work that's being done by the organization. So we're going to talk about some of the common principles and practices that seem to be associated with extraordinary effectiveness. Each of our panelists this morning has an interesting, thought-provoking perspective that will elaborate on what these principles and practices might entail. And we hope that you leave feeling inspired and maybe even challenged to think at a higher level about what you might be able to do in your work. So on our panel, we have a scholar, a senior leader, and a rising leader. So let me go through each of our panelists and introduce them. First, we have Dr. Kim Cameron. I'm very honored to introduce Dr. Cameron. I consider him to be a very good friend. He comes to us with a long and impressive background. He earned his PhD from Yale University, where his dissertation focused on the question, correct me if I've got this wrong, which school is more effective, Yale or Harvard? Is that correct?
That's close.
Okay. For over 30 years, he has continued to study a variety of topics related to organizational effectiveness, generating over 120 articles and over a dozen highly influential books. Dr. Cameron's past research has explored organizational downsizing, quality culture, virtuousness in organizational life, and the development of management skills. His current research focuses on virtuousness of and in organizations and the relationship to organizational success. In other words, he is elaborating a virtue-based theory of organizational excellence. He is one of the co-founders of the Center for Positive Organizational Scholarship at the University of Michigan. Currently, he serves as Associate Dean for Executive Education in the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. He is also the William Russell Kelly Professor of Management and Organizations and a Professor of Higher Education in the School of Education. He has served as Dean in the Weatherhead School of Management at Case Western Reserve University, as Associate Dean in the Merritt School of Management at Brigham Young University, and in many other academic assignments. I first met Kim over 15 years ago when I was a master's student at Brigham Young University, and it has been my genuine pleasure to count him as one of my mentors ever since. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Cameron. Next, our senior leader. This is Mr. Doug Fecher, sorry. Doug is president and CEO of Wright Patt Credit Union, and he has held this position since December of 2000. He spent his entire career working in the credit union industry, starting as a teller at a credit union in Hamilton, Ohio. During his time, did I have that correct? Okay, so during his time as CEO, Wright Patt Credit Union has grown and gained a reputation as one of the very best credit unions in the United States. As we were talking in preparation for this meeting, Doug briefly shared the experience he had of becoming CEO. He said that as he contemplated what he wanted to do as a leader of Wright Patt Credit Union, he realized that he needed to focus on building an atmosphere that genuinely values the character of people. His efforts have led to a laser-like focus on doing what is best by members, employees, and community. He is widely acknowledged as a leading thinker in the credit union industry, chairing or participating in several national organizations that relate to credit union policy and practice. Locally, he is heavily involved in a number of civic organizations. For purposes of our panel, Doug will help us look at the practices associated with extraordinary organization. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Doug Fecher. Finally, I want to introduce one of my former students, Ms. Ashley Franer. Ashley has been an employee at Wright Patt Credit Union for over 6 years. She is also a recent graduate from Wright State University, where she majored in human resource management. Currently, she works as a financial solutions coach. I taught Ashley's class in organization development about 2 years ago. In one of our class sessions, we were discussing some of the principles of exceptional organizing that we'll cover today. Some of the students, I must say, were expressing some cynicism and skepticism about some of the things we were talking about. And I remember acutely this moment when Ashley raised her hand and she said, you know, my organization practices these ideas. And she began to elaborate at length about some of the things that were going on at Wright Patt Credit Union. I was so impressed that I invited her to my office, and we had about an hour and a half long conversation. And I have to say that my mind and my jaw, my jaw kept dropping further and further as I heard more and more about what they were doing. So so Ashley represents kind of this frontline perspective of the employee who's affected by the principles and policies that create extraordinary organization. And she can give us insight into the real story of Wright Patt Credit Union as it has evolved over the last 6 years. Please join me in welcoming Ashley Franer. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to give each of the panelists some time to give some formal remarks, and then we will have an opportunity to have some discussion. So I'm going to turn the time first to Kim. We'll give him about 15 minutes, and then we'll have Doug in about another 15 minutes, and then Ashley. And then I'll facilitate some conversation at that point. So,
can you shift your slides?
Sure, yes. Let's see. Well, let me get Kim all set up for success here. Let's see. There we go. All right.
Terrific. Thank you, David. Good morning. I am so delighted. I'm going to raise this a bit, David. I am so delighted to be here, grateful to have an opportunity. I was talking to Ashley, and she asked if I had been to Dayton, and I've certainly driven down 75 multiple times. I thought Dayton was on the west side, on the on the right-hand side going south, instead of that's how close I've been. I have a son who played soccer for the University of Michigan, and we played Dayton once, so I came down wherever the soccer field is. I knew that's where I was. That's it. So this is really a delight. I had a chance to go up and down the hall and read about the Nutters and the Bells and other famous folks. So it's really a delight to be here. I'm going to spend a few minutes from the academic perspective. I'm going to try to keep you awake. And the way I'm going to do that is to show you some slides. Doug is not going to use slides, but then he's a dynamic, enthusiastic, entertaining, stimulating speaker. I'm not, so you'll have to watch. You'll have to watch these. All right, let me start by and my task is to talk about extraordinary performance and what that is. So I want to have you think about the line on the top of this slide is representing a deviance continuum. Now, the word deviance in English normally has a negative connotation, right? If I call you a deviant, well, that's normally a criticism. But deviance is simply defined as the aberration from the norm. It's unexpected behavior. So we can think of negative deviance, or we can think of positive deviance. Okay, now there are several things that are important about thinking of deviance on a continuum. One of them is all organizations exist to eliminate deviance. That's why we organize. So if we all said, let's all go build a Habitat for Humanity house, well, the first thing we do is say, we've got to get organized. You've got to work on this. You've got to work on this. We hold a breakfast workshop. First thing everybody does, come and sit down in a table. Otherwise, it's chaos. And so David's trying to get us organized by saying, all right, everybody sit down, slow down, stop talking. Then we can get things done. So by definition, organizing eliminates negative deviance. But by definition, it also eliminates positive deviance, the opportunity to be extraordinary. So organizations always have pressure to be in the middle, normal, predictable, stable, and not extraordinary, not excellent. Now, we know a second implication is we know a lot more about this continuum, one side of the continuum than the other. For example, think of physical health. On the left-hand side is illness, flu, cardiovascular problems, diabetes, something. In the middle represents an absence of illness or basic health. 90% of all medical research focuses on the left-hand side. right? Almost all of our attention is paid to how to get us to a normal, healthy state. Very little is focused on the right-hand side, which is, in fact, a state. I mean, it's Olympic fitness levels. Yesterday, we're teaching at the University of Michigan an executive program for senior executives. They're here for a month on our campus. One of them is an Ironman competitor. Actually, this guy lives in Cleveland. He works for Parker Hannifin. Now, an Ironman competition is 2.4 miles of swimming, followed by 110 miles on the bike, followed by a full marathon, 26.2 miles, all at the same time. I mean, that's going as fast, as hard as you can go for about 12 hours. Somebody whose body works differently than mine. Positively deviant physical health. Very little research is focused on that end of the continuum. You get a Bowflex commercial on TV, but that's not science. Come on. So we don't know much about excellence. Psychologically, it's worse. 99% of all psychological research focuses on the left-hand side of the continuum. Anxiety, stress, burnout, schizophrenia. As soon as we're in the middle, that's called subjective well-being is fine. As soon as we're there, happiness quotient is okay. You're at your set point. By and large, we stop studying people. But on the right-hand side, there is, in fact, positively deviant psychological functioning. Now, sometimes the word that describes that state is flow. You've had an experience of being in flow. That is, you're so immersed in a task you care about, you lose track of time, you lose track of physiological needs. If you put electrodes on your brain, you're using more of your brain capacity than normal. Well, the question is, how do you get your organization into a state of flow so that you're using more of the capacity than that's normal? It's there, but how do you unleash that capacity? How do you get people to be so consumed that their performance is far better than normal? We don't know much about that. When you go to school at Wright State University and get a degree, often, many courses hand you a case study. What's going wrong? What are the challenges? What are the issues? What are the problems? Come up with some recommendations and defend yourself. That is, solve the problem, figure out a way to be effective, be, number one market share, enter China successfully, fend off the competition. That is, almost everything we study gets us to the middle of the continuum. But on the right-hand side, there's something we refer to as positively deviant health. Now, I refer to the left-hand side as deficit gaps, problem-solving gaps. The right-hand side as abundance gaps. The right-hand side represents extraordinary, spectacular. I would even refer to that as virtuous performance. Now, virtuousness is hard to swallow in an academic or professional setting because it has such a philosophical connotation or a religious connotation. But virtuousness in the original Greek and the original Latin simply means the best of the human condition. The highest aspirations human beings have for themselves is a virtuous state. When you are at your very best, that's a virtuous condition. We aspire to have all human beings become virtuous. All right, my research has been, how do you get an organization to go from the middle of the continuum to the right-hand side? How do you really foster, enable, create extraordinary, spectacular, virtuous performance? Now, the good news is that if you focus on abundance gaps in an organization, you unleash something called the heliotropic effect. Do you know what the heliotropic effect is? You do, you just don't know you do. You put a plant in the window, over time, it leans toward the light, right? That's an example of the heliotropic effect, which can be defined as follows. All living systems, everything alive, from single-cell organisms to complex human systems, everything alive has a tendency toward the light away from dark, toward positive energy away from negative energy. So in nature, that's normally the sun. Or, most accurately defined, toward that which is life-giving and away from that which is life-depleting. Now that's rational, isn't it? I mean, you think of evolutionary processes. All species are attracted to that which gives life and are repelled by that which endangers or detracts from life. So that's how we all survive. We're attracted toward positive things. Now, there's a lot of research to suggest that's true, and the implications are very important. If human beings are actually flourishing, are inclined, do better in the presence of positive energy relative to negative energy, it matters a lot. And I won't talk about the research. It would take us a long time to do that, but I would like to convince you that that's true. And the reason is that most of us, most of the time, focus on problems, deficits, issues. Your child comes home with a report card that's got an A in history, an A in math, an A in chemistry, an A in humanities, a D- in math, and an A in humanities. What do you say? Well, what's wrong with math, right? We focus on the negative all the time. But the heliotropic effect is real, and it affects human beings. It also affects organizations. And I'll spend just a couple of minutes about that. For the last 10 years, my own research has been focusing on how do you enable, foster, help organizations implement virtuous practices. And if you could do that, does it affect anything? Now, the irony is, if I walk into Doug's organization and I say, Doug, I want to take your time, and I want to take the time of your employees. It's going to cost you something. I want to study humility and gratitude and forgiveness and kindness. And the average CEO will say, are you kidding me, Cameron? I mean, look, I got an analyst meeting in 15 minutes. I got customers who are requiring service. Look, this is grandmother's advice. You show me how it pays off, and then I'll give you my time. But otherwise, say, look, I don't need to spend time on this. So the irony is, I don't need a payoff to be virtuous. I mean, if I'm kind only to get what I want, it's no longer kindness. It's manipulation, right? I'm only kind to you if I get what I want. So kindness is its own reward. However, almost nobody will pay attention, at least in organizations, unless you can get some kind of payback or return. So my research has been, I don't need a payback, but is there one anyway? Turns out, I'm going to show you a few studies very quickly. We don't need a payback, but there is one. And so the conclusion of 10 years of research is the bottom paragraph. It's the stuff at the bottom of that slide, which essentially is, look, if you focus on an abundance culture, that's what I call it, or implement virtuous practices, and we don't have time to talk about what those are, but nevertheless they are, you will get, by the way, this meets the eyeball test. I can look you in the eye and say, I'm firm, the conclusion is valid, and I'm certain. You'll get higher profitability. You'll make more money. Higher productivity, better quality, fewer mistakes, less waste. Better customer satisfaction, customer loyalty, employee engagement, employee satisfaction, lower turnover, and innovation. Those 6 factors. You will get them. So let me give you a little tiny bit of evidence, and I'll do this very rapidly. And David's going to pull my coat as soon as I'm out of time. Is that all right? How much? What do you think? Okay. Well, whoops. So let me skip this one then. So what we've done, David was involved in this study. We studied organizations across 16 different industries. We had financial services, we had healthcare, we had government organizations, we had manufacturing, and so on. We simply measured positive practices or virtuous practices and the 6 outcomes. And sure enough, what we discovered is a very strong, statistically significant relationship between virtuous practices and hard numbers like making money and soft numbers like morale and engagement of employees. We thought, wow, that's pretty impressive. So let's study some more organizations. This is a study of the U.S. airline industry after 9/11. Now, you know, after 9/11, it was against the law to fly. You couldn't fly for the next 2 or 3 days. Do you remember? Yeah, some of you aren't old enough to remember that, but you remember that. Well, when people began flying again, ridership topped out at 80% of previous ridership levels, which was fine, except the economic model of the U.S. airline industry is based on 86% seat fill rate. So if you don't have 86% of the seats filled in a plane, you're not going to make money. You top it at 80%, 7 firms went bankrupt. However, the 2 firms hurt the worst were the short-haul carriers. That is, people stop. I think maybe I'll drive down to Columbus. I don't think I'll take a shuttle. I think maybe I'll I'll drive to Chicago from Detroit. I think maybe I'll take the train from New York to Washington. Remember, people, I don't think I want to fly. The two short-haul carriers were U.S. Airways, Southwest Airlines. They approached this very differently. U.S. Airways said, we're getting hurt worse than the industry average, so we've got to downsize more than 20%, and they declared financial exigency, which means all union contracts are null and void. So thank you very much. Is it Linda? Thanks very much, Linda, for 20 years of service. Hand in your keys, out of here, no benefits, no severance, no nothing, because we don't have the money. Southwest Airlines laid off no one. Now, wait a minute. You're getting hurt worse than the industry average. How can you do that? The CEO said, look, we're losing a lot of money. Look at the top paragraph. And clearly, he said, we can't continue to do this indefinitely, but we're willing to suffer some damage even to our stock price to protect the jobs of our people. Well, why would you do that? Look at the last 2 or 3 lines. You want to show your people that you value them, you're not going to hurt them just to get a little more money in the short term. Not furloughing people, he says, breeds loyalty, breeds a sense of security, breeds a sense of trust. Now, that's all well and kind of virtuous, isn't it? The trouble is this is a publicly traded firm. And stock investors don't just hand you the money saying, we really like your firm. Take my money. No. I want a return. I mean, Wall Street's the least virtuous place on the planet. I don't care about virtuous. I want money. I want a return, okay? So the study we did was, well, what's the financial returns? It turns out the correlation between the financial return and virtuousness of the downsizing strategy, and I've only talked about 2 firms, not all of them, the correlation between financial return and the virtuousness of downsizing is 0.86. You're not correlated with your mother at 0.86. I mean, that's an enormously strong correlation. Money follows virtuousness. And lots more to say about that. So we decided to study financial services. Of all the places on the planet you'd expect, who cares about kindness, gratitude, compassion, humility, forgiveness? Not Wall Street. So we picked 40 firms on Wall Street, the equivalent of Wall Street, financial service firms. And we said, let's see if we can convince them to take this seriously. So some of them implemented positive practices, and some of them didn't. Some of them were better than others. So we simply did an analysis. If you implement and improve in these positive or virtuous practices in Wall Street, then what happens the next year and the next year after that and the next year after that? That is, we're trying to create causality. As it turns out, the statistic in the middle of that slide is an R squared. That's a statistic that means this is the amount of variance that we can account for. In other words, what this little slide shows you is that half the profitability, and this is 6 different ways to measure financial return in these firms, half the variance in profitability is due to virtuous practices. I mean, it's incredibly impressive. I think it's so big, I'm not even sure I believe it, but virtuousness predicts success, even on Wall Street. And it's not only financial return, but as you'd expect, a whole bunch of other things, voluntary turnover and engagement and so on. Healthcare you'd expect. This is a whole bunch of hospitals, 30 different hospitals. We simply did the same thing. We measured virtuousness and how well they did. Then 2 years later, we measured the impact. We can get double-digit improvement in healthcare, patient satisfaction, the quality of care, even doctor and nurse relationships. We can affect that by a double-digit amount simply by having organizations decide to get serious about virtuousness. So I'm done, I think. Conclusion. I am very convinced, after 10 years, that virtuousness matters. It's not just grandmother's advice. It's just not what you hear at Sunday school or in the synagogue or in a temple. It's, in fact, it has practical utility. And when you implement virtuousness, you get extraordinary organizational effectiveness. Thanks, David.
Okay. Doug, do you want to come up here? Sure.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm really happy to be here this morning. I love going around and being able to talk about Wright Patt Credit Union. because I think it's a unique story. And I'm glad now that Dr. Cameron has told me why what's happened has happened. That's good to know. But a little bit about Wright Patt Credit Union. We're a credit union is a cooperative. It's owned by its depositors. There's no stakeholder or investors or stockholders in it, which in the end has a lot to do with some things. We are about $2.5 billion in assets. That makes us about the 50 or 55th largest credit union in the country. We have about 500 partners. That's what we call our employees, and there's a reason we call them that. And we're running a pretty good record of success right now. And I can tell you that one of my favorite things to talk about why that success is happening is because we have, and I'm not bashful about saying this, we have the best employees in the entire Miami Valley region. And the reason we have those is because we believe that the only way to run a successful organization is to have the best people. We run our credit union on what we call a stakeholder model. And that stakeholder model says that there's 3 stakeholders to our organization. A stakeholder is defined as a group of people or an individual or somebody that has a lot to lose or a lot to gain by how well we as a team run the organization. And those 3 stakeholders are the members of our credit union. They are the depositors. They are the owners as a cooperative. They obviously are a stakeholder of our organization. The second is the credit union itself, because if the credit union isn't taken care of through our operations, then it won't be around to take care of anybody. And the third stakeholder is our partners, our employees. But here's the key. It's one thing to have a stakeholder model. The key to the model is we don't consider any one stakeholder to be more important or less important than the other 2. What we try to do is run our organization so that the benefit of its operation benefits all 3 stakeholders equally. That way, when we're working in concert with one another, everybody rises by the same tide. And so I'm going to focus my comments this morning about the employee stakeholder because I think they truly are the key to our success. We hold our employees in such regard that we put them right in our vision statement. The vision of Wright Patt Credit Union is to be the best financial institution our members have ever experienced and the best place our employees have ever worked. And we spend an awful lot of time on that second piece of that thing. You see, because an organization isn't a building, it's not a bunch of money somewhere that somebody's spending, it's not a bunch of computer systems, it's people who get together to do something. And at Wright Patt Credit Union, that thing is, I tell everybody when I meet them, we all have the same job description at Wright Patt Credit Union, and that is, if we do our job right, at the end of the day, somebody else will be better off than they were at the beginning of the day, thanks to them coming into contact with us. It's a culture, really, and a culture isn't a set of tasks. A culture is a set of beliefs, and it's a set of values. And I remember when I became CEO in one of the worst possible ways, that my predecessor passed away suddenly on the job. And when leadership gets thrown in your face that way, I can literally remember lying on I happened to be on vacation shortly after that happened, and I'm lying on the front of a sailboat, and I had no idea what I was going to do with the organization. Really no idea. And then it just kind of came to me, you know what, if you just put people first and take care of them, they'll take care of you. That's exactly what we've tried to do over the years. We do it in a lot of different ways. Starts with our hiring. I like to believe it's very difficult to get hired at Wright Patt Credit Union. If you're going to have the best people, you got to hire the best people. We spend a lot of time. We have a terrific human resources staff. In fact, 3 of them are here today to make sure I don't say anything wrong. I would tell you they're the best human resources department in the world, except for some of you might be hiring. So I would tell you they're a great deal of trouble. They take a lot of time. Anyway. Starts with the hiring, but it actually starts with the first day of work. When we bring our employees in, we decided if we're going to have the best people, if we want them to really believe in what it is we're doing, we have to have a different experience when you come to work. So remember when you all started a job? On your first day of work, you came in, you went to the Human Resources Department, probably filled out all those legal forms and state forms and signed up for benefits and did all that kind of stuff. And you kind of went around and shook a few folks' hands, and you ultimately got to wherever it was you were going to work, and then maybe there was a training program, or maybe you sat with somebody. My favorite all-time new employee training is to sit with somebody else. We decided that we needed to do that a little bit differently at Wright Patt Credit Union. So when you come in on your first day at Wright Patt Credit Union, we tell you to wear jeans, dress comfortably. It will be the last day you'll ever be able to wear jeans at Wright Patt Credit Union. 3 of the people in the room are laughing about that. And we spend the day teaching you what it means to be an employee of Wright Patt Credit Union. And what it means to be an employee at Wright Patt Credit Union is your job is to make other people better off. Quite that simple. As I already mentioned, it's the same job description that we have for everybody. So at one time we let them sit in beanbag chairs, and we did an entire day around service to others, including at some point during the day of our first day experience, we would send the group off to do a service project in the community. And it might have been helping on a Habitat for Humanity house. It might have been putting food and food together for the feeding shelters that we have. It might have been building trikes for young kids that have disabilities and they're not able to have a regular bicycle, or it might have been all wide variety of things. The whole point is at the end of the day, we wanted our first day employees to go home, and on your first day of your job, you remember what happened. You got home and somebody said, well, how was it? And what we wanted them to say when they got home is say, you would not believe it. I have just joined the greatest company that I could have ever joined. Because we try to tell them what it's about to be an employee of Wright Patt Credit Union, that they're every bit as important to us as the other 2 stakeholders. We do all kinds of little things that add up to, I think, a pretty big important thing. We take the welfare of our employees so important that every 2 years we do a quality of work life survey. We simply go out and ask them, is this the best place you've ever worked? Could it be better? Could it be different? About 3 or 4 surveys ago, you might be surprised that on that quality of work life survey, which measures 9 components of working somewhere, one of them is compensation. And you might be surprised to know that compensation generally ranks towards the lowest of the satisfaction levels. People all want to get paid more. As we took a look at it there, we figured out, you know what, they're right. We hire about, I don't know, somewhere around 200 folks that go by the generic term tellers. And if you were a teller at Wright Patt Credit Union back at that time, you would come in at pretty much an entry-level wage, and your only ability to move up in the organization, it took somebody above you to vacate their position, and then you had to post for it and get chosen, and you could be able to move up. So with our Human Resources Department, we put together a thing called, we need to figure out a better name for this. We call it stratification. And it simply meant that employees could move themselves up the organization rather than us having to choose them. It simply said that if you pass these knowledge objectives and experience objectives, you can move up whether we have an opening above you or not. And so at the time, I think there were 7 levels of stratification. Now there's 6. Ashley here, just talking to her, she's at what amounts to a 5 now, working on her 6. But do you see the point? They could move up in both pay and knowledge without the organization saying it was okay or time. And the change that we experienced when that happened was significant. The satisfaction of people working there when they had more control over their own pay became one of the core things that we build the organization around. That all came from that quality of work-life survey that we had, as did very many other things over the years. The things that we do to try to make sure that our employees know they're valued. I meet with every single new employee in groups sometime during their first week or 2 of employment. And that's because I think it's important that they hear from the CEO just what is expected of them. And we really only have 5 expectations. We tell them all this. First expectation is to show up. Second expectation is to give us 100%. Third is to be flexible. We're a small company. Fourth expectation is to have fun. In fact, we tell our managers that you are to practice servant leadership. That means your job is to take care of the folks below you, and better make sure they have fun at the job, because these aren't easy jobs that our folks have. And the 5th one is at the end of the day that we expect you to go home and spend it with your family. See, we're not a place for workaholics. You know, there's 2 ways to work. You can work to live, or you can live to work. We believe in the first one. You work to live. If you ever ask yourself who you work for yourself, you work for your family, you work so you can have a better life, your kids can have a better life, the people that you love and care about, they should be better off because of your work. So our job at Wright Patt Credit Union is to make sure our employees have an opportunity to be better off. They should be successful. The more successful our employees are, the more successful our organization can be. Everything we do in human resources needs to be built around giving our employees the opportunity to be more successful. The other thing I tell them during that first day, the first time I meet with them is, you know what? If you don't wake up every morning excited and thrilled that you get to help somebody today, I'm very honest with them, you can't work here. See, our model is a brittle model. It's not a good place for selfishness. If you have that selfishness, the model breaks down. Everybody has to wake up in the morning excited that they get to take care of somebody else. So what are the results? Through the greatest financial crisis of most of our lifetimes, Wright Patt Credit Union has had its best years in history. Fastest growing years, and even though we're a not-for-profit organization, our profits run about double the credit union industry. And I think that's another interesting point to bring up. So we make all these profits. There's no stockholder that gets them, so what do we do with them? Well, we give most of them back to the members. If we make more money than we need, it's not our money. We give it back to the people that made it. But I will never give money back to the members unless I first give it back to the employees. So last year, every full-time employee got a bonus of at least $1,500 for the results that they created, because you know what? I didn't create them. My senior management team didn't create them. Ashley created them. She's the one that actually talks to the members, helps them to see what a wonderful organization that we have. I love that day. And then I tell them, you know what, there's no magic about this. We have to earn it from the members first. So next year we start at zero. If you want a bonus like that again, you need to help us figure out how to get the members engaged in the organization. We don't hide it either. We tell the members that we gave the employees that bonus. In the end, I'm probably running out of my time. And if you could pass me my iPad, I have something I want to read. But I have to tell you this, and it goes to something that Dr. Cameron said, and it goes back to that sailboat. Often people ask me, you know, what are you worried about? What's your biggest fear? And here's my biggest fear. My biggest fear is that I would ever have to contemplate downsizing the organization's people. I absolutely cannot imagine what it must be like for somebody to go to bed at night not worrying whether they had a job in the morning. And I tell our senior management team that all the time. Our job is to take care of the people that work here, because if we take care of the people that work here, they'll take care of the customers, or members in our case. And if they take care of the customers will turn around and take care of the credit union, and the credit union will never have to worry about whether it has the resources to take care of its employees or not. But in my mind, it starts with, we need to take care of our employees. And so if you ever get to lead an organization, put that first and you will never fail, I can tell you that. So I'll finish with this. I just got this email from one of our partners. One of the things we do with our partners is they wear uniforms out in our member centers. If you've ever been to one, you've seen them in their uniforms. The reason we put them in uniforms is because, A, it saves them a little money. They don't have to buy a bunch of clothes for work. Two is it drives home the fact that we're a team. Teams wear uniforms because it creates a source of pride in that team. Creates a source of, we're all on the same page, we're all pulling on the same rope in the same direction. And if we pull it hard enough and long enough, we're going to succeed. We're going to be champions. And that's important to me. I'm a big sports fan. So here's a email that just came out from one of our partners. Frankly, I don't know this young lady. We have about 500. I used to know them all, but now I don't. But this is Brooke Snell wrote, and Brooke's from Mad River. Where are you going, Ashley? Friday after work, I went to the mall shopping for my mom's Mother's Day gift. I went into Kay's Jewelers, and while looking at jewelry and drooling over it, I noticed an older woman looking at me. The woman looked right at me and said, "Thank you." After getting over the general confusion and the lady taking the hint that I had no clue what she was talking about, by the dumb look on my face, she said, "Wright Patt has done so much for me. I love you guys." I don't know about you, but this really touched me. She's writing this email to her colleagues. I adore my job, and I try my best like all of you, but to see a member recognizing all we do just made me that much more proud of what I do. I almost cried. We are truly helping people through life. That's what we do here every day. It makes a difference in someone's life. So let's try to make a difference, the best possible experience we can offer. Yes, I'm a sap. says that right there. But it was so unexpected and just such a genuine comment that this lady truly loves what we do at the credit union. I just thought I'd share because it was such a great moment for us. Congrats, everyone. You're awesome, and people love you. In the end, isn't that really what it's all about? If you look at what you're to do to make money, you won't make very much. If you look at what you do to make other people successful and better off, the bounty that will come your way can be measured in so many ways, and it will just completely shock you. So thanks to our Human Resources Department, Shonda, Sabrina, and Brandy. You guys can tell me what I said wrong later on. And I can't wait for you to hear from Ashley because she is truly a representative of our best. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me to come here this morning and talk to you about my experience with Wright Patt Credit Union. Doug already talked about a few of the things that I wanted to talk about, my experience there. Dr. Bright and I had a class together about 2 years ago, and he really liked some of the examples that I had. One of the things that Doug talked to you about was stratification that was implemented by our HR team probably about 3 or 4 years ago now. And before that, people did have some frustrations on how they could move up in the company and how they could advance. But one of the things that I don't think managers expected exactly how it would affect the company was really the management responsibility that was going to change. In my member center or branch, we before this change, we had a manager, an assistant manager, and a head teller. And because of this stratification change, it kind of took that head teller position away. So where we had really 3 management roles in the member center, we only had 2 now, which kind of left the teller line without a manager. And so we had the manager and the assistant manager, and their roles really changed because of the stratification. They needed to be more like coaches and really try to work on employees to become better and try to figure out what they really wanted to do in the company. And so on the teller line side, they didn't really have a lot of time to spend over there kind of telling us what to do and making decisions for us. So at first, it was kind of frustrating because you have a group of people that are used to somebody telling you what to do all the time, somebody that you're constantly going to and asking questions and making them make the judgment call, and all of a sudden we don't have that anymore. And so for a few months right after this change, it was frustrating and people just didn't really know what to do. But it didn't take long for us as a teller line to really realize that it's up to us to run the teller line. It's really up to us to be the credit union and stand up and really start making decisions ourselves and really start self-managing. Because before this change, it was really more of a hierarchical organization. It was really more of a top-down approach. But because of this change, it changed the way things were done. So we started making decisions for ourselves, and those who were natural leaders started evolving into the natural leader that they were. And we became more involved in the credit union. We weren't just employees anymore. This was our credit union. This is where we worked. We believed in what we did. And our top managers like Doug, they always told us, we're here to help people through life. You are the credit union. You are important. And so because of that, we had more value in what we did. We weren't just accountable to our managers anymore. We were now accountable to our coworkers, our partners. If you missed work all the time, you weren't just, going to hear it from your manager. You were going to hear it from your partner and say, where are you? We need you. It did a lot of changes like that. Another one of the changes that I really wanted to talk about, which Doug also highlighted on, was the financial crisis that we have been going through for a few years now. I remember about 3 years ago, it was in 2009, and each year at Wright Patt Credit Union, we hold what we call a partner day, where we go down to Sinclair and we basically have a company-wide meeting where everybody from each individual member center comes together, and we talk about, kind of highlight the things that have happened the previous year, and we reflect on how we've done, and then our goals for the next year. And during this particular year, Doug talked to us about some of the things that NCUA had announced and how the financial world was going to start affecting our individual credit union, and how we had to decide if we were going to let this decision that had nothing to do with us, nothing to do with the choices that we had made, just kind of fell in our lap, things that we had to do, if we were going to grow out of this or if we were going to hurt from it. And Doug said right off the bat, I don't want to let employees go. I don't want to downsize. That's not what I want to do. I want us to grow from this problem. So what he did is he showed a clip from the movie Apollo 13. And it's the clip where they realize that the shuttle is not going to be able to land on the moon. But there's still that hope and possibility that the shuttle will be able to come back to Earth and everyone on the shuttle will survive. So the commander comes into the room and he's got all his team together and basically asking them to brainstorm, how can we get the shuttle back with everyone alive? And so he's got all his team talking and they're arguing and saying, well, that wasn't made to do that. Well, that wasn't made to do that either. And a lot of commotion going on. And finally, the commander just steps in a stern voice. He says, I don't care what anything was made to do. I want to know what it can do. And that's what Doug was telling us that day. He said, I don't care what any of you up to this point have been trained to do. I want to know what you can do. And a lot of changes came after that day. He told us that, people in certain positions may have to be moved, and people did get moved. And he said, I know this is going to be uncomfortable, but we have to work together as a team. And so people were moved from different positions, which probably obviously made them uncomfortable because that's not what they were trained to do. But if that was an area of an expertise that they had, then that's where he needed them to go. Some goals that he had that day was not only did he want to just survive that year financially, but he wanted us to grow from it. And the 3 goals were that he wanted to pay a gain share bonus to the employees, he wanted to pay a patronage dividend to our members, and he wanted us to have a positive net income at the end of the year. And he didn't just leave that day with that. I think the next day he sent out an email to the whole credit union thanking them for coming to Partner Day, thanking them for listening, and then really highlighting the areas that we were going to change and letting us know that it's going to take every single partner in this credit union to make this change possible. And without you, it's not going to happen. And it really outlined all the areas that we're going to change, how we were going to have to start being more frugal in our spending, and it was going to need all of our ideas on how to do that. And then each month after that, he continued to communicate to us how things were changing and all the positive things that were going on and how well we were doing, and praising the different departments for doing that, and praising the different departments for working together and communicating better with each other. And to let you know, at the end of the year, we did all 3 of the goals that Doug had set in place. We did pay a gain share bonus. We did have a patronage dividend, which I believe was $3 million that year that we paid out to our members. And we did come out with a positive net income, and we've continued to grow ever since. And that change didn't just happen overnight. It came because they stayed positive. They could have looked at the situation that we were put in, and they could have worried about it, and they could have said all the negative things that could have been said. And I'm sure there was all kinds of negative things that were going on in all the top managers' heads. But they stayed positive and they believed in their employees. And that didn't just start that day. It starts with all the departments working together. I believe that the Human Resources Department really understands the vision that we have, because it starts with recruiting the right employees, because I work with some amazing people that we really believe in what we do. We really do help people through life, all the way from balancing checkbooks to being there for their first car purchase, being there to sign the paperwork for their first home, and all the steps in between. And I'm really proud to work where we do.